Let's dive into a journey that can reshape your mind forever. Welcome to everyone on my channel. Solitude is not loneliness. It's not isolation in its tragic form. Rather, solitude is a powerful, intentional withdrawal from the noise of the world to listen more deeply to your own mind, to nature, to the divine, and to the whispers of wisdom that get drowned out in the chaos of everyday life. When you choose solitude, you're not running away from life. You're stepping into the deeper layers of it. Wisdom is not something you gain through mere exposure to books or opinions. Wisdom emerges from reflection, from space, from time spent with your thoughts uninterrupted. In solitude, you begin to realize that your mind has a landscape, a terrain of questions, answers, fears, and dreams. When you finally sit with yourself without distractions, those hidden layers rise to the surface. Cultivating wisdom through solitude starts with intention. Most people fear being alone not because solitude is inherently scary, but because it forces them to confront themselves, their fears, their regrets, their emptiness. But here's the secret: on the other side of that discomfort lies clarity. In the beginning, solitude can feel like a storm. All the mental chatter you've buried under to-do lists, conversations, and social obligations suddenly becomes loud. You'll feel restless. You'll reach for your phone. You'll want to turn on music or TV or call someone, anyone. That's your mind resisting the discomfort of inner work. But wisdom demands that you stay, that you sit with the unease, that you observe your mind as it panics, complains, accuses, or mourns. Because when you stop running from that discomfort, something remarkable happens. You begin to understand it. You start to ask yourself, why do I feel this way? And then you wait. You listen. In that stillness, insights begin to emerge. You realize you've been angry about something for years, but never allowed yourself to process it. You discover that your dreams were shaped more by societal expectations than your authentic desires. You see the patterns of your behavior, the triggers, the wounds, the beliefs that guide your decisions. And in recognizing these, you're no longer controlled by them. This is the birth of wisdom, seeing clearly, choosing intentionally, and understanding deeply. And solitude is the gateway. In a world that glorifies productivity, solitude seems like a waste of time. But the wisest minds in history, from philosophers to inventors to spiritual leaders, have all emphasized the need for time alone. Why? Because wisdom isn't downloaded from others. It is revealed from within. Consider this. How many hours a day are you bombarded with input? News, social media, conversations, podcasts, notifications. Your brain is constantly processing noise. That noise becomes clutter. And wisdom doesn't emerge in clutter. It emerges in the stillness between thoughts. Solitude gives you that stillness. You begin to hear the faint voice inside your intuition. That voice doesn't scream, it whispers. And if you're too distracted, you'll miss it. But if you train yourself to enter solitude regularly, to sit quietly without judgment or agenda, that voice becomes clearer. It guides you, it warns you, it comforts you. That voice is where your deepest wisdom lives, and the more you listen, the stronger your inner compass becomes. Let's talk about the difference between solitude and isolation. Isolation is unchosen. It's often a result of circumstances, illness, abandonment, exile. It's painful because it's laced with rejection. Solitude, however, is a choice. It's intentional. It's empowering. You choose to be alone not because the world has pushed you out, but because you want to go inward. It's like leaving a loud party not because you're uninvited, but because you want to walk under the stars and hear your own thoughts again. Solitude is sacred space. It's a mental sanctuary. And when you start treating it as such, your life transforms. There's something profoundly human about solitude. Every culture has stories of wise hermits, monks in caves, prophets in the wilderness, writers who retreat to remote cabins. What did they all find in solitude? They found themselves. And in finding themselves, they found universal truths. You don't have to live in a cave to find wisdom. You can create solitude in your own life, a quiet walk in the park, an hour in the early morning with your thoughts, a weekend retreat from devices. It's not about where you are. It's about the intention with which you enter that space. Many people equate being alone with being unproductive. That's the lie of a culture obsessed with output. But here's a thought. Some of the most powerful work you'll ever do is invisible. It's the inner work processing grief, clarifying values, confronting fears, realigning goals that sets the stage for wise action. Solitude allows you to do that work without distraction. And when you emerge from that space, your actions become clearer, kinder, wiser. You don't react, you respond. You don't chase, you attract. You don't pretend, you become. Solitude sharpens your discernment. When you're constantly around people or constantly online, it's easy to get lost in groupthink. You adopt opinions that aren't yours. You believe things because they're popular. You act in ways that gain approval rather than reflect your truth. But when you step into solitude, the fog lifts. You begin to question, do I really believe this? Do I truly want this? Is this aligned with who I am becoming? And when you have those answers, you become unshakable because your choices come from within, not from pressure. One of the overlooked gifts of solitude is emotional clarity. In daily life, emotions often get buried. You feel something, anger, sadness, jealousy, but you suppress it because you're busy or because it's socially inconvenient. Over time, these suppressed emotions turn into emotional fog. You feel heavy, stuck, or numb, but don't know why. In solitude, that fog lifts. The silence gives your emotions room to breathe. You can finally ask, what am I really feeling? And give that emotion space to speak. And when emotions are allowed to speak, they transform. Anger becomes clarity. Grief becomes compassion. Fear becomes courage. That's wisdom in motion. Solitude also deepens your relationship with time. In noise, time feels fast, like it's slipping away. But in solitude, time slows down. You begin to savor moments. A single breath becomes meaningful. A cup of tea becomes a ritual. The rustling of leaves becomes music. You begin to live from presence rather than panic. And presence is the birthplace of wisdom. When you're fully present, you see more. You hear more. You feel more. You understand more. And from that space, your decisions become infused with thoughtfulness and depth. It's also important to mention that solitude doesn't require you to do anything. In fact, the magic of solitude is that you're not trying to achieve, you're simply being. And in being, you discover. Some people use solitude to write, to create, to pray, to meditate, and all of that is beautiful. But sometimes solitude is simply sitting in silence, watching the sunrise, listening to your breath, letting your thoughts flow without interruption. There's no agenda, no performance, just awareness. And awareness is where wisdom begins. One of the modern tragedies is that people don't know how to be alone anymore. The moment they have a second of quiet, they reach for their phones, they scroll, they escape. But here's a truth. The more you escape yourself, the further you get from wisdom. You don't become wise by running, you become wise by facing. And solitude gives you the courage to face yourself, your life, your truth without filters or distractions. It's raw, yes, but it's real. And only what's real can transform you. If you truly want to cultivate wisdom through solitude, you must develop a practice. Make solitude a rhythm, not a reaction. Don't wait for burnout or heartbreak or existential crisis to be alone with your thoughts. Choose solitude when things are good too. Let it be a regular part of your week, a place you return to like home. And every time you return, you'll discover something new. A deeper insight, a forgotten dream, a buried truth, a new layer of strength. That's what solitude offers, a return to your essence. In solitude, you also learn humility. You realize how small you are in the grand scheme of things, and yet how sacred your existence is. You reconnect with nature, you feel the seasons shift, you notice the stars, you observe how everything is interconnected. This perspective makes you wise because wisdom isn't just about knowledge, it's about understanding your place in the universe. Solitude gives you that view unobstructed by ego or performance. And perhaps the most beautiful gift of solitude is this. It teaches you that you are enough, without applause, without validation, without noise, just you breathing, existing, observing, learning. And in that enoughness, you stop chasing, you stop comparing, you stop pretending. You become. You become someone rooted, someone centered, someone wise. Not because the world says so, but because you have sat in silence and remembered who you truly are. Solitude teaches you the difference between reacting and responding. In the noise of the world, it's easy to react emotionally, impulsively, carelessly. But in solitude, you develop the muscle of pause. You learn to sit with your emotions before expressing them. You observe your thoughts before acting on them. That gap between stimulus and response, that's where wisdom lives. It's in that pause that you ask yourself, is this true? Is this kind? Is this necessary? And when those questions become your habit, your entire way of interacting with the world changes. You become more thoughtful, more compassionate, more discerning. You no longer waste energy on things that don't matter because solitude has helped you define what truly does. Solitude also teaches you the art of listening, not just to others, but to yourself. In daily life, your inner voice is often drowned out by the opinions and expectations of others. But when you retreat into solitude, that inner voice grows stronger. It starts to guide you, to correct you, to encourage you. It becomes a compass. The more you listen to it, the more you trust it. And the more you trust it, the more authentic your life becomes. Authenticity is a hallmark of wisdom. When you know who you are and what you value, you stop bending yourself into shapes that please others. You speak your truth not aggressively, but confidently. You live in alignment with your values, not perfectly, but intentionally. That alignment brings peace, and peace is a sign of wisdom. Another powerful aspect of solitude is that it cultivates patience. In solitude, there's no rush. There are no deadlines, no need to perform. You simply are. And in that space, you realize that growth doesn't happen overnight. Clarity doesn't arrive on demand. Wisdom isn't a switch, it's a slow unfolding. Solitude teaches you to wait, to trust, to allow. You begin to understand that some answers take time, some wounds heal slowly, some insights emerge only after long silence. And that's okay, because in solitude, you learn to honor the pace of your own becoming. You stop comparing your journey to others because you're finally in touch with your own rhythm. That self-trust, that self-honor, it's what wisdom feels like. Solitude is also where creativity flourishes. When your mind is uncluttered, your imagination awakens. You start seeing patterns others miss. You connect ideas in new ways. You dream bigger, think deeper, feel more. Some of the world's greatest works of art, literature, and philosophy were born in solitude. Not because solitude forces creativity, but because it removes the blocks. It silences the critics. It creates space. And in that space, your true voice emerges. Not the voice shaped by trends or expectations, but the voice of your soul. That voice is powerful. And when you start creating from that place, whether it's writing, music, inventions, or ideas, you begin contributing to the world from a place of wisdom, not ego. Solitude also confronts you with your mortality. In the silence, you begin to realize how fleeting life is, how quickly time passes, how precious each moment is. That awareness doesn't make you fearful, it makes you present. You begin to live more intentionally. You waste less time on things that don't matter. You cherish the people you love. You forgive more easily. You let go of grudges, because solitude has shown you what truly matters and what doesn't. It has stripped away the illusions and left only what is real. That kind of clarity is rare, and it changes you, it softens you, it strengthens you, it deepens you. Wisdom is not about knowing everything, it's about knowing what to care about. Solitude teaches you that. One of the challenges people face when entering solitude is the fear of boredom. We're so used to being stimulated every second that the absence of noise feels unbearable. But boredom is just the gateway. On the other side of boredom is presence, and on the other side of presence is wonder. When you sit through the initial discomfort, your senses awaken. You start noticing things you never noticed, the way light filters through your window, the rhythm of your breath, the stories your thoughts are telling. You realize that life is happening in every moment, not just in the big events. That awareness fills you with gratitude. And gratitude is a doorway to wisdom, Because when you're grateful, you stop taking things for granted. You stop sleepwalking through life. You become awake, alive, attuned. Solitude also teaches you boundaries. You begin to see where your energy is being drained, which relationships are nourishing and which are toxic, which habits are helping you grow and which are keeping you stuck. In solitude, there's no one to blame, no one to distract you. Just you and the truth. That can be uncomfortable, but it's also liberating because once you see clearly, you can choose differently. You can protect your peace. You can prioritize your growth. You can say no to what doesn't serve you. That self-respect, that clarity, it's what makes you wise. You're no longer controlled by guilt or people-pleasing or fear of missing out. You live from a place of inner alignment, and that alignment becomes your strength. Solitude also teaches you to befriend yourself. Most people have a critical relationship with themselves. They judge, they punish, they criticize. But in solitude, you learn to soften. You learn to listen to yourself the way you would listen to a friend, with compassion, with curiosity, with care. You begin to appreciate your own company. You find peace in your own presence. That self-love is not narcissistic, it's foundational. Because you can't truly love others if you don't know how to love yourself. And you can't know yourself if you never spend time alone. Solitude is that sacred time. It's where you learn to sit with your flaws and still offer yourself grace, where you recognize your mistakes and still choose growth, where you hold space for your pain and still choose joy. That emotional maturity, that inner stability, it's wisdom in its purest form. Solitude also opens you to the divine. Whatever your beliefs, time alone often becomes a spiritual experience. In the quiet, you begin to sense something greater than yourself, a presence, a guidance, a mystery. You feel connected to something eternal. That connection brings humility. You realize you're not the center of the universe, but you are a cherished part of it. You begin to trust that you're not alone, even in solitude. That's a paradox, but it's true. In solitude, you often feel more connected to nature, to spirit, to your own soul than you do in a crowded room. That sacred connection becomes a source of wisdom because it reminds you of what's eternal, what's unchanging, what truly matters. Solitude can also heal trauma. In daily life, it's easy to stay distracted from your wounds. But in solitude, those wounds come to the surface. That can be painful, but it's also necessary because you can't heal what you won't feel. In the quiet, you begin to grieve what you never allowed yourself to grieve. You begin to process what you once suppressed. You begin to reclaim parts of yourself you had abandoned. That healing isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, a softening in your heart, a release of tension in your body, a new perspective on an old story. But over time, it transforms you. You stop being ruled by your pain. You start being guided by your healing. That shift is wisdom. It's not just about knowing better, it's about becoming better. Solitude also teaches you simplicity. When you step away from the noise, you realize how little you truly need to feel fulfilled. You stop craving excess. You start appreciating the basics, a quiet morning, a good book, a walk in nature. You realize that peace isn't found in more, it's found in enough. That contentment doesn't come from chasing it, comes from appreciating. That mindset shift is revolutionary because it frees you from the consumer trap, from the comparison game, from the pressure to constantly do and prove. You begin to live from a place of sufficiency. And that sufficiency becomes a wellspring of joy, of presence, of wisdom. Solitude, when embraced, becomes a mirror. It shows you who you are when no one's watching, what you think about, what you fear, what you dream of. And in seeing yourself clearly, you gain the power to grow, to evolve, to change. That self-awareness is not always comfortable, but it's always valuable. Because the more you know yourself, the more empowered you become. You stop reacting from blind spots. You start responding from clarity. You stop projecting your pain. You start owning your story. That inner ownership, that radical responsibility, it's wisdom in action. And it all begins with solitude. Solitude is not an escape from life, it's a return to it. It grounds you, centers you, reconnects you. It doesn't make you antisocial, it makes you more intentional in your relationships, It doesn't make you disconnected, it makes you more deeply connected. To yourself, to others, to life. The most powerful decisions you will ever make will come from the silence of solitude. The most profound insights, the deepest healings, the clearest visions. They don't come when you're scrolling or rushing or pleasing. They come when you're still, when you're alone, when you're present. So don't fear solitude. Embrace it, seek it, honor it, make time for it, protect it. Because in that sacred space, you meet yourself. And in meeting yourself, you meet wisdom. Not the wisdom of books or gurus or traditions, but the wisdom that's been inside you all along, waiting for you to be quiet enough to hear it. Solitude is a gift that few know how to unwrap. It doesn't come with instructions, it doesn't entertain like a new gadget, and it doesn't scream for attention. Instead, it waits patiently. It waits for you to slow down, to put away the distractions, to step out of the noise. And when you finally enter it, something begins to shift. At first, you might feel restless. You'll notice the silence in the room. You'll become hyper-aware of your own breathing, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator. It's foreign, this silence, but stay with it. Let it wrap around you. Let it hold you. Because in that stillness lies something sacred, the space where your inner world begins to speak. Wisdom lives in that space. It doesn't shout over traffic. It doesn't fight with social media. It whispers. It waits for the moment when you're finally quiet enough to listen. And when you do, you'll begin to uncover truths that no book, no teacher, no podcast could give you. Truths about yourself, about your past, about your purpose. Solitude becomes the classroom of the soul. You begin to ask yourself questions that you've long avoided. Why do I fear being alone? Why do I always seek validation? What would I do if no one was watching? These are not easy questions, but they're necessary, because wisdom isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about being courageous enough to ask the right questions. And solitude gives you the safety and space to do that. The modern world rarely encourages such questioning. We're trained to look outward, to copy trends, to follow instructions. But in solitude, you break free from that programming. You begin to think for yourself, feel for yourself, decide for yourself. That independence of thought that is wisdom. Not blind rebellion, but conscious discernment. You become your own guide, your own compass. You stop outsourcing your decisions and start trusting your own insight. And that's the beginning of inner freedom. In solitude, you come face to face with your inner dialogue. That constant stream of thoughts, some encouraging, some cruel, some confused. At first, it can be overwhelming. You might think, is this what's always running through my head? But don't turn away. Watch it, observe it, because in observing your thoughts, you create distance from them. You begin to realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. This is a powerful realization. It's the key to emotional regulation, to inner peace, to clarity. Once you see that you can witness your thoughts without being controlled by them, you begin to cultivate real wisdom. You stop reacting to every mental impulse. You begin choosing which thoughts to entertain, which beliefs to question, which patterns to break. You become the sculptor of your mind. Solitude gives you the chisel. With time, solitude becomes less of a challenge and more of a refuge. It becomes a space you crave, not to escape from the world, but to reconnect with yourself. You begin to notice the small things, the subtle shifts in your emotions, the tension in your shoulders, the ideas that drift in when you least expect them. These moments might seem small, but they carry profound significance. They are moments of presence, and presence is the foundation of wisdom. You can't be wise if you're constantly distracted. You can't be wise if you're always living in the past or the future. Wisdom lives in the now, and solitude anchors you to it. One of the great transformations that happens in solitude is that your relationship with yourself begins to heal. For many, the inner critic is loud. It echoes the voices of past teachers, parents, bullies. It tells you that you're not enough, that you'll fail, that you shouldn't even try. But solitude gives you the opportunity to challenge that voice, to ask, whose voice is this really? And do I have to believe it? Over time, a new voice emerges, quieter but truer. the voice of your true self, the self that knows your worth, that remembers your strength, that honors your journey. Listening to that voice changes everything. It makes you resilient. It makes you grounded. It makes you wise. Solitude also invites you to slow down. In a world obsessed with speed and productivity, slowing down feels radical. But it's in the slowing down that you begin to live fully. You start savoring your food, listening deeply in conversations, noticing beauty in ordinary moments. And in that presence, life begins to feel richer, more meaningful, more sacred. Wisdom isn't about rushing to success. It's about walking with awareness, appreciating the path, learning from every step. In solitude, you learn to walk that way not with urgency, but with intention. There's also a beautiful paradox in solitude. The more time you spend alone, the more connected you feel. Not just to yourself, but to others, to the world, to the divine. This isn't isolation, it's integration. You begin to see yourself in others. You develop compassion because you've sat with your own pain. You offer grace because you've learned to give it to yourself. This kind of wisdom doesn't divide, it unites. It builds bridges instead of walls. It heals instead of harms. And it starts with a simple act, sitting in silence with yourself. Solitude is where the mind settles and the heart speaks. It's where your values get clarified, your dreams get refined, your wounds get tended. It's not always easy. Sometimes solitude will confront you with memories you'd rather forget, truths you've long denied, feelings you've suppressed. But that's part of the process. Healing isn't always gentle. Growth isn't always graceful. But it is worth it. And in solitude, you begin to trust that worth. You begin to see that your life is not a series of random events, but a sacred journey. And every moment of silence brings you closer to the wisdom of that truth. Solitude also allows you to recalibrate, to step back from the noise and ask, is this the life I want? Are these goals truly mine? Or have I been chasing someone else's version of success? These questions can change your entire direction. They can prevent years of regret. They can bring you back to what truly matters, to your core values, to your deepest joys, to the people and pursuits that nourish your soul. Without solitude, these questions often go unasked, and unasked questions become unexamined lives. But solitude invites you to examine, to reflect, to choose. That freedom of choice, that awareness, it's the essence of wisdom. Solitude can also reconnect you to nature. In the quiet, you begin to feel the rhythm of the earth. You watch the clouds drift, the leaves rustle, the birds move. You start to see that you're part of something vast and interconnected. This perspective brings humility, and humility is essential for wisdom. Because wisdom doesn't arise from arrogance, it arises from awe, from reverence, from the understanding that you are a thread in a much larger tapestry, that your life, while unique and valuable, is also part of a grand design. And that awareness shapes how you live. It makes you more mindful of your impact, more grateful for your blessings, more attuned to the sacredness of life. In solitude, you also confront your habits. With no one to distract you, your defaults become visible. You notice how often you reach for your phone, how quickly you judge, how frequently you replay old conversations. This awareness isn't meant to shame you, it's meant to free you. Because once you see a pattern, you can change it. You can replace reactivity with reflection, addiction with intention, avoidance with courage. Solitude gives you the pause you need to break cycles. And breaking those cycles opens the door to wisdom. Because wisdom isn't about having a perfect life, it's about having a conscious one. A life where you're awake to your thoughts, responsible for your actions, and aligned with your values. Finally, solitude reminds you of your inherent worth. In a world that ties your value to your productivity, your appearance, your popularity, solitude whispers a different truth. You are enough just as you are. Not because of what you do or have, but because of who you are. This realization is radical. It changes the way you work, the way you love, the way you live. You stop hustling for approval. You stop performing for attention. You start living from a place of inner fullness, and that fullness overflows into everything you do, into your relationships, your work, your creativity, your presence. That kind of life rooted in truth, in love, in awareness, that's a wise life. And it all begins with solitude. The path to wisdom isn't glamorous. It's not always easy, but it is simple. Sit with yourself, breathe, listen, feel, reflect, repeat. Do it not once but regularly. Let it become your practice, your ritual, your homecoming. Because the more you return to yourself, the more you return to wisdom. And the more you live from wisdom, the more beautifully your life unfolds. Solitude is not just a tool for personal growth. It is the foundation upon which the most resilient, creative, and wise lives are built. When you begin to integrate solitude into your life, not as an emergency break from the chaos, but as a regular rhythm, it becomes something sacred. It becomes the time where clarity emerges, where intuition speaks, where your truest self returns home. You no longer treat time alone as something to be filled or avoided, but as something to be honored. This shift changes everything, because once you stop fearing silence and start embracing it, the world within you begins to awaken. You realize there is an inner landscape as vast and complex as the outer one. And within that landscape lies not only your wounds and memories, but your calling, your truth, your unique wisdom. In solitude, you become the student and the teacher. You study your habits, your reactions, your values. You reflect on your past, explore your present, and shape your future. Each session in solitude becomes a class in self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-mastery. You stop measuring your life by how much you do and start measuring it by how deeply you understand. You realize that rushing through life blinds you to its beauty, and that true understanding only comes when you slow down, observe, listen, and reflect. The wisdom cultivated in solitude is not the kind that screams for attention. It's not performative. It's not rooted in ego. It is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted. It transforms you from within. It makes you less reactive, more thoughtful, less needy, more fulfilled, less distracted, more aligned. And it doesn't just benefit you, it benefits everyone around you. Because when you live from wisdom, you create ripple effects. Your words become more healing. Your presence becomes more grounding. Your decisions become more impactful. Solitude is not a selfish act. It is one of the most generous things you can do. Because when you return from solitude, you return more whole. And when you are whole, you can love more completely, lead more wisely, and serve more powerfully. The challenge is that the modern world doesn't reward solitude. It rewards speed, noise, visibility. It celebrates hustle and dismisses stillness. But you must remember that just because something is popular doesn't mean it is wise. Wisdom often walks the quieter path, the less traveled road, the one that leads inward before reaching outward. And that's where your strength will lie, in your willingness to be different. To choose solitude when others choose distraction. To choose depth when others choose surface. To choose truth when others choose noise. In solitude, you begin to understand the difference between being busy and being effective, between being known and being fulfilled, between chasing validation and living with purpose. You stop wasting energy trying to prove your worth and start using that energy to create, to grow, to serve. That reallocation of energy is one of the first signs that wisdom is taking root. You begin to feel lighter, clearer, more intentional. Your mind becomes less cluttered. Your heart becomes less burdened. Your decisions become more aligned. And it's not because life got easier, it's because you got wiser. Solitude sharpens your instincts. In the quiet, your gut feelings become louder. You start sensing things you used to overlook. The tone in someone's voice, the energy in a room, the subtle inner pull guiding you away from one path and toward another. This intuitive clarity is not magic. It is a muscle strengthened in solitude. The more you practice stillness, the more attuned you become to the signals within you. And when you live guided by those signals, you make choices that honor your truth, that honor your future, that protect your peace. One of the most misunderstood aspects of solitude is that people assume it means being antisocial or emotionally distant. But true solitude enhances your capacity for connection. It teaches you to show up in relationships without neediness or codependence. You don't love people because you need them to fill a void. You love them because you have so much within you to give. You approach connection from fullness, not from lack. And that makes your relationships healthier, deeper, and more stable. Solitude also helps you face your shadows. There are parts of yourself you've avoided: old pain, guilt, shame, regrets. In solitude, those shadows emerge, not to punish you, but to be healed. You begin to realize that ignoring your pain only prolongs it, but sitting with it allows it to soften. You learn to forgive yourself, to make peace with your past, to understand that every version of you was doing the best they could with the awareness they had. This compassion toward yourself expands into compassion for others. You become less judgmental, more understanding. You stop expecting perfection and start honoring humanity in yourself and in those around you. This is the kind of wisdom that transforms communities, not just individuals. In solitude, you also learn how to be okay with uncertainty. You stop demanding answers and start appreciating questions. You realize that not everything needs to be figured out right away. Some things require time. Some truths unfold slowly. Some paths become clear only after you've walked for a while. Solitude teaches you to be okay with the in-between, to trust the unfolding, to find beauty in the not knowing. And this trust becomes a foundation. It keeps you steady in storms, grounded in chaos, peaceful in transitions, because you know that clarity comes in its own time. And until then, you can rest in awareness, in faith, in presence. Solitude also invites creativity of the deepest kind. Not just artistic creativity, but the creativity of living. You start to design your life more intentionally. You question the default settings. You ask, what do I want my mornings to feel like? What kind of energy do I want in my home? How do I want to spend my years on this earth? These questions shape your routines, your environment, your relationships. You stop living on autopilot and start curating a life that reflects your soul. This intentional living is one of the most powerful outcomes of solitude. It gives you back your agency, your power to choose, to shape, to lead. And it all begins by stepping away from the noise long enough to hear your own answers. Wisdom gained through solitude also changes your relationship with failure. You begin to see failure not as a flaw, but as a form of feedback. You understand that mistakes are part of mastery, that missteps are part of the dance. In solitude, you have the space to reflect on your failures without judgment, to extract lessons, to adjust your course, to grow. And because you're no longer performing for approval, failure doesn't break you. It builds you, it strengthens you, it becomes part of your resilience. This mindset is what allows wise people to navigate life with grace. They're not afraid to fall because they know how to rise. And they've practiced rising quietly, consistently in solitude. Solitude also reveals your true priorities. When the noise fades, you begin to see what truly matters. Not the things you chase out of fear or habit, but the things that feed your soul. Relationships that nourish you, work that fulfills you, experiences that awaken you. And you start making decisions based on those priorities. You say no more often. You protect your time and energy. You stop chasing things that once looked important but no longer resonate. This alignment makes your life simpler but deeper, less crowded but more meaningful, less flashy but more honest. And in that honesty lies peace. One of the most profound realizations that comes from solitude is that happiness is not out there. It is in here. It is not found in constant stimulation, but in deep contentment. Not in acquiring more, but in needing less. Not in becoming someone else, but in fully being who you are. This happiness is not fleeting. It is not dependent on conditions. It is rooted in self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and spiritual connection. And it grows each time you return to solitude. Each time you sit with yourself and remember, I am enough. I have enough. I know enough. This inner peace radiates outward. It affects how you speak, how you work, how you love. And over time, it becomes your default state, not because life is perfect, but because you have found stability within. Solitude also strengthens your spiritual life, whatever form it may take. Whether you connect to God, the universe, nature, or the divine within, solitude becomes sacred ground. It's where prayers deepen, where gratitude expands, where awe returns. You begin to feel a quiet reverence for life itself. You see the divine in ordinary things, in your breath, in the sunrise, in a stranger's smile. And this reverence fuels your values. It reminds you of what truly matters. of who you want to be, of how you want to show up in the world. You begin living not just with purpose, but with presence. Not just with goals, but with grace. This spiritual grounding becomes an unshakable source of strength. It carries you through uncertainty, pain, and loss. It becomes a light in the dark, and it grows brighter every time you return to solitude. In the end, the path of solitude is not about escaping the world, but about engaging with it more wisely. When you emerge from solitude, you bring back gifts, insights, clarity, peace. You offer those gifts to your relationships, your work, your community. You become a presence of calm in a chaotic world, a voice of truth in a noisy world, a source of light in a dark world. And that is the gift of wisdom. Not just knowing, but embodying. Not just seeing clearly, but living accordingly. Not just learning, but becoming. So take the time, make space, go inward. Sit in the silence. Listen to your soul. Let solitude shape you. Let it strip away what's false and reveal what's true. Let it guide you not away from life, but deeper into it. Because the wisest version of you is not found in the noise, it's found in the quiet, waiting, ready, whole. If this journey through solitude and wisdom inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep insights that can truly transform your life.